Hello, how are you? I hope you are fine and healthy. Four short comments and a poem on Portuguese environmental law in state of emergency. Number one comment. The COVID-19 pandemic relegates environmental issues to the background. Until the month of February, environmental concerns were at the forefront of the national and international political agenda. Hot topics were discussed daily in the media, both at national and international level, such as the decision to evaluate the environmental impact of the location of the new airport in Lisbon, the movement of cars in the cities, and the emission of polluting substances into the atmosphere, the measures to fight against climate change, among many others. Now, from one moment to the other, all these issues are no longer new. Nowadays, the pandemic is at the center of all concerns and has monopolized all the news, giving rise to single-team media and leading to the relative evaluation of environmental values. To verify this relative erasure of environmental law in the legislative framework resulting from the state of emergency, just look at the special section of the official law diary in Portugal, Diário da República, dedicated to the legislation produced in the pandemic situation, which contained only a single administrative regulation about a matter of environment, one decision of the Minister of the Environment on waste management, dated from the 31st of March. Number two, comment. And yet, everything seems to have started with an animal outside its environment, which will contaminate man. We are facing a zoonotic disease. The word zoonosis was created by Rudolf Virchow, a German physician from the 19th century, to designate a disease of animal origin which is transmitted to man. The expression comes from the ancient Greek and is the combination of the terms zoon, animal, and nosos, disease. Zoonoses are now a very popular reality because behind the less fashionable epidemic or pandemic is always some angry little animal, be it a mad cow, a sneezing bird, a febrile pig, a bat with Ebola fever, or, as now, another bat or an infected pangolin marketed in Wuhan city. And behind each one of these diseases, there is always an explanation endowed with a component of an environmental nature. As in previous cases, the coronavirus determines a multiplicity of environmental explanations, ranging from exotic and exaggerated tales to more prosaic and realistic descriptions. Among the first, we find pantheistic explanations of holistic nature, which speak of the revenge of the goddess Gaia, the Pachamama, or the Mother Earth, because of the bad deeds to the environment caused by evil men. Explanations that believe in the unity and identity of all the species, defending the need to modify our attitude towards non-human species as a way to reconstruct the harmony of nature, like Peter Singer. Geopolitical conspiracies, in which there are scientific laboratories working on the mixture of animal viruses with human cells in order to create and intentionally disseminate new viruses, increasingly dangerous and resistant for reasons of ideological nature and political hegemony. There are also more realistic and rational explanations, which assume that at the moment it is not yet possible to know all the causes of the pandemic, but it is very likely that this anomalous environmental situation comes from the risks of excessive human aggression to nature, such as those occurring in certain markets in which humans coexist with domestic and wild animals, alive and dead, without any hygienic care. This, once again, shows there are environmental limits to economic development and that it is necessary to find out new cultural paradigms to achieve a balanced relationship between man and the environment. The consequences of the pandemic for the environment may not be all necessarily bad. Paradoxically, in the hardest days of the crisis, some consequences of the coronavirus seem to be good daily news. Such favorable effects of the environment were the decrease in air pollution resulting from the absence of factory work, the stop of the circulation of airplanes, of cars, which produces a beneficial effect on the ozone layer. But there is also the reverse of the medal. In fact, looking at the unfavorable effects of the pandemic on the environment, there is the news about the abandonment of sanitary masks and hygienic gloves on public roads, about the accumulation of urban waste on the streets, about the problematic issues of toxic waste. This makes the question of waste production and management a mandatory topic of pandemic time. Taking in consideration the absence of specific environmental legislation for the COVID-19 pandemic in Portugal, I decided to examine here two cases of the administrative function within the scope of public waste policy in times of emergency. Number 3, comment. The strange case of the decision of the Minister of the Environment on the 31st March, which determines that domestic waste should have as its normal destination incineration or landfill, without any previous treatment, but also decides to continue to apply the previous year's rates, which aim to encourage more environmentally friendly waste management solutions. It should be said, on one hand, that requirement of special care with the management of toxic or hazardous waste, even if only potentially, is totally correct and necessary in pandemic time. But on the other hand, it is already more difficult to understand where is the rationality and the proportionality of the rule according to which, in a state of emergency, all the domestic garbage must go to incineration or to landfill. And even less, it is possible to understand how the landfill of waste, without any previous treatment, could contribute to prevent the spread of coronavirus. Furthermore, it should be noticed that this decision is accompanied by the maintenance of incentives given to operators regarding waste management, namely aiming at respective reuse and recycling, in a situation where it is established that this more ecological waste management is suspended. It is totally incomprehensible that the return of bad environmental behavior may be worthy of environmental incentives. From a legal point of view, I would say that the minister's decision that incorrectly applies the criteria of rationality and proportionality should be considered as arbitrary and capricious. Number 4, comment. The case of the temporary suspension of selective door-to-door collection of urban domestic waste in Lisbon, already pointing out in the same direction as the mentioned government decision, but taken before that, some days before, is the order of the Lisbon City Council on the 20th of March. The Lisbon City Council ordered the suspension of the selective door-to-door collection of recyclable waste. However, the selective collection of waste is maintained, but only in the eco-pods. This means that there is only an undifferentiated collection of domestic waste, and that there is a reduction in the days of collection of this waste door-to-door. And this is done on the basis of a reference to an opinion of the Portuguese Environment Agency on the waste management in situation of pandemic. We need to say that this opinion is also quoted in the justification of the Minister for the Environment's decision, mentioned above. Only in both cases, the opinion recommends much less and something quite different from that was being decided in both situations. As a matter of fact, the opinion recommends special care to be taken in dealing with potentially hazardous waste in individual households, as well as in accommodation locations with a high concentration of people, as well as ports and airports, as well as with toxic waste, such as hospital waste. But the opinion also advises that selective collection should be maintained, avoiding overloading the treatment of final destination, incineration, and landfill, which is precisely the opposite of what was done in the two cases we have been examining. Once again, we need to call into question the proportionality of the measure taken by the Lisbon City Council. Whether it is true that the new rules for the collection of waste are intended mainly to protect the workers of municipal services, who, by the way, should instead be protected by the use of special equipment to deal with pandemic waste. On the other hand, such measures do not properly consider the enormous risks to the public health resulting from the change of the waste collection, as it is, moreover, pointed out in the opinion of the Portuguese Environment Agency. Besides the suspension, albeit temporary, of the selective collection of domestic waste is a civilizational setback in terms of environment, which calls in question all the environmental education efforts to raise individual awareness of the need for waste separation, in addition to jeopardizing the goals that the Portuguese state has undertaken to achieve at European and international level for a more environmentally friendly waste treatment, and so far always insufficiently complied with. Number 5, poem. Epilogue, a poem by Fernando Pessoa, overcome. Since the beginning of the crisis, in Portugal like in other countries, the health situation has shown ups and downs, although it is possible to talk about a progressive improvement, not always in a linear way. However, for the health situation may be completely resolved, it will be necessary to find a vaccine. In the fight against COVID-19 in Portugal, we first had the state of emergency, declared on the 19th of March, foreseen in the Constitutional for exceptional situations, which allows the restriction of fundamental rights. Then the state of emergency was replaced by the state of calamity, regulated by the Civil Protection Law with a less severe regime on the 3rd of May. Now, after the 1st of July, the public authorities have decided to establish a mixed or differentiated solution. Thus, the state of calamity remains for 19 parishes in the Lisbon region, the contingency state for the rest of the Lisbon region and the Tagus Valley, and the state of alert for all other parts of the country. As far as environmental law is concerned, the decision of the Minister of the Environment remains unchanged. But the Lisbon City Council, on the 1st of June, ordered the return of the selective door-to-door collection of domestic waste in the days that existed before the pandemic measure. With the resumption of economic activity, little by little, the old environmental problems return, and sometimes even in an aggravated way, as happens with the overuse of non-recyclable plastics for sanitary purposes, which complicates the situation of waste management. We can only hope that the situation will improve and that the fight against the pandemic will not forget the need for constant protection of the environment. I finished this lecture with an excerpt from the poem Villeggiatura, Country Holiday, by Fernando Pessoa Álvaro Campos, a Portuguese national poet, one of the most important of the 20th century, one of the most important poets of the 20th century, in which the poet faces two of the fundamental questions that we have been appreciating today, namely, how to avoid the eternal return of the garbage. How do you keep the spit from eating us in the feet? Fernando Pessoa, Villeggiatura, Country Holiday. Thank God I'm crazy, that everything I gave came back to me like trash, and like spit thrown in the wind, scattered me by the free face. That all I was is tied to my feet, like the burlap cloth to wrap nothing. That everything I thought tickled my throat and wants to make me puke without having eaten anything. Thank you very much for your patience. It was a pleasure being with you. Take care. Stay healthy.